It has never been easier to become famous. With the arrival of the internet age providing us with the resources necessary to either build an audience ourselves or diligently witness the growing influence of a stranger online, the allure of fame and celebrity have never been more sought out, more desired, and most importantly, more realistically attainable. A YouGov poll from 2018 revealed that over 1 in 3 people, 38% to be exact, from Gen Z admitted to wanting to be famous, with millennials falling a little under that number at 28%. More research ranging between 2012 to 2019 has shown a similar sentiment. A 2021 Atlantic article titled "To Be Happy, Hide from the Spotlight" by Arthur C. Brooks listed sources displaying children and adolescents' desire for internet-based careers, influencing and YouTubing, etc., as well as research from Gallup conducted in 2019 displaying adults' views on what society thinks of fame and/or celebrity, that people view it as the ultimate marker of success. From a young age we want fame. It's just that we slowly quell that want throughout the years. From the moment we begin to understand human relations, we understand the most desirable spot is the one wherein all eyes are on us. Or so we are made to believe. And we are made to believe it. Through a series of examples and theories, some personal, I want to elaborate on why fame and celebrity are so damn attractive to us and try to understand what makes the want of fame a shameful pursuit. My theory breaks into 2 elements I want to expand upon. The first is the obvious one. Fame is mass acceptance, which equals problem solved. The second, maybe a little less obvious, is that the taboo of wanting fame itself is preventing people from learning how to live without it. Allow me to explain. In 2022, the first unauthorized biography on Anthony Bourdain was published by writer Charles Learson, titled "Down and Out in Paradise: The Life of Anthony Bourdain." For those unaware, Anthony Bourdain was a chef turned celebrity who hosted the TV shows A Cook's Tour, No Reservations, The Layover, and Parts Unknown. Bourdain's fame began in the late 1990s with the release of his 1999 memoir, Kitchen Confidential, and his star only rose from there. People liked Bourdain for his honesty, his unkempt nature, and the fact that he simply looked cool. He had what he self-admittedly referred to as the best job in the world. He travelled wherever he wanted, sampled the local cuisine, spoke to interesting people, and all the while, everything was paid for by rich execs at various TV stations. To many, his life seemed perfect. Which is why, when Bourdain took his life in June 2018, the world was confused. How could someone with the best job in the world, money in the bank, loads of adoring fans, a daughter, and so many opportunities, just take their own life? This question has continually been thrown about since that June day in 2018, and it is a question that cannot truly be answered. However, Learson gave it a good go, and got as close to the bone of Bourdain's personal life as anybody had ever gotten before. Needless to say, the release of Down and Out in Paradise was controversial, but not necessarily for the reasons one may expect. Whilst the book highlighted the negative aspects of Bourdain's personality, like being a bit of an arsehole to his co-workers, ghosting his friends post-celebrity chef ascension, or adolescent acts of petty crime to feed drug addictions, none of these elements had caused even so much as a ripple in the fanbase. Bourdain had always been open about his negative personality traits. Instead, what people took particular offence to was the publishing of direct messages between Bourdain and his ex-wife, Otavia Bourdain, days before his death. Because these messages revealed something even the most die-hard fans never saw coming. He hated them. I hate my fans too. I hate being famous. I hate my job. Bourdain's text to Otavia could have been one of 2 things. Either he genuinely meant what he said, or he was lashing out in a time of need. Former or latter, I have no doubt in my mind that the level of fame Bourdain experienced within his lifetime must have been exhausting. Bourdain had received the double-edged sword of getting what he wanted. Nevertheless, when asked about any pressures, grievances, or general complaints regarding his notoriety, Bourdain had continuously downplayed the inconvenience of fame, often harkening back to his days as a chef, waking up early, working long hours, and being barely able to afford his rent. Bourdain would talk lightly of the celebrity chef shtick, and act like the newfound attention was nothing to worry about. Bourdain grabbed the opportunity for a new life when his memoir, Kitchen Confidential, was published in 1999, and instantly became a bestseller. He made the most of the situation whilst he could, and he turned himself into a huge countercultural figure in the process, earning the prestige and recognition we associate with making it or just being successful. His down and out to huge star storyline inspires people today. and his grace in receiving so much praise added more praiseworthy fuel to the fame fire. The problem is, Bourdain is just one of many examples like this. One of the most universally kept secrets is people's inherent desire for fame. Whereas before fame was a gift of myth supplied mostly to those who committed courageous acts in war or human progression, nowadays fame has been so widely parcelled out that it has its own spectrum of intensity. You have those who are A-listers and those who are Z-listers. The former, as probably already figured out, are the crème de la crème of celebrity. The Z-listers are people like small niche YouTubers. If that. We all understand the pitfalls and traps of fame or the want for it. Despite this acknowledgement, the fame-seeking masses continue forward, hoping to piece together some clarity for their lives via the external acceptance of strangers. I have rarely seen the direct mentality of a desire for fame explored. Granted, people often speak on the aforementioned pitfalls and traps of attaining fame, but not in the pursuit of fame itself, why people want it, and what happens when people don't get it, and more importantly, what it says about the pursuers themselves. The reality is that people who seek fame have been convinced that mass acceptance equals their problem solved. But before we go into that, let me quickly give a rundown on the history of fame and celebrity. Celebrity and fame are two different types of recognition that will first need to be distinguished if we are to talk about these subjects. It goes as such. Fame is recognition for doing something, whereas celebrity is recognition for one's personality. Despite this, the two are interchangeable, as someone can achieve something while still being known for their personality. However, the celebrity is the type to plaster their faces on adverts, appear on red carpets, and in tabloid newspapers. Basically, a celebrity invites us, whether through force or choice, into their lives to show us the spoils and the scandals. A famous person, on the other hand, may achieve a feat in history but not necessarily pursue this newfound recognition any further. Someone who breaks a world record and then steps back from the spotlight would be considered famous. Once again, these can overlap to some degree, but at the extreme edges of their spectrums, it's like comparing David Attenborough to Kim Kardashian. In Holly Grout's 2019 article titled Celebrity Matters, wherein she writes about the history of celebrity culture, Grout distinguishes fame and celebrity whilst providing the history of the words themselves. Fame. Derived from the Latin fama, fame was first connected through Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, to Roma, the goddess of rumour and spreader of news, who used her wings and her multiple mouths to tell all. Celebrity. Celebrity, which derived from the Latin celebrum, a word that implied both the celebration and the potential crowding, perhaps we would say mobbing, of an individual. Especially in regards to fame, both terms have shifted somewhat over the years. However, you can see where the general idea came from. Grout suggests it wasn't until the late 18th to 19th centuries that celebrity became a popular part of our culture. This was down to many factors, including most of all the invention of the printing press. With this invention, newspapers were free to distribute their writings all over the country, and with it, stories containing notable individuals. Early in the birth of the printing press, however, fame was in written accounts, with the general public not knowing what most notable names even looked like. As Neil Postman mentions in his 1985 book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, during this period the average person likely wouldn't have been able to even recognize the faces of the first 15 US presidents, as photographs simply were not a thing. Paintings were, of course, however they were not widely circulated and could be embellished to suit the man in the portrait. Public figures were known largely by their written words, for example, not by their looks or even their oratory. It is quite likely that most of the first 15 presidents of the United States would not have been recognized had they passed the average citizen in the street. This would have been the case as well of the great lawyers, ministers, and scientists of that era. To think about those men was to think about what they had written, to judge them by their public positions, their arguments, their knowledge as codified in the printed word. Once photographs began to be added to the mix, our idea of celebrity began to thrive. Now we could see the notable names, which helped us in separating the famous from what they were famous for, thus creating the celebrity. A person who not only has fame, but somebody who is known for their fame and uses it for their own means, whether good or bad. It is widely agreed that Sarah Bernhardt, an actress whose career began in 1866, is considered to be the first modern celebrity. The 19th century saw the first examples of well-known figures, Bernhardt being one of them, endorsing multiple products as well. The first celebrity endorsement of a product was by actress Lily Langtry, whose face was plastered on advertisements containing Pears soap. Bernhardt would endorse this product too. By sheer proximity to the product, Pears soap saw a rise in sales, and other companies began to follow along with the trend. As the years have progressed since the boom of celebrity in the late 18th to 19th centuries, the influence only grew stronger moving into the 20th century. The arrival of the television and cinema allowed us to not only view celebrities from a black and white photograph plastered in a newspaper, poster or leaflet, but from a domineering screen playing out a fantasy. As the celebrities continually embedded themselves within these fantasy stories being projected to the public, the celebrities themselves slowly became part of the escapist fantasy regular folk used to bear reality. The TV came to life. Holly Grout comments on this fantasy-like aspect of celebrity early in her article. Celebrity distinguishes itself from other forms of public approbation because it centers on the individual personality. In their seemingly immortal perfection, celebrities offer us escape from the mundane, they entertain us, they give us pleasure or help us express our pain. In their all-too-human imperfection, they reassure us about our own shortcomings, foster a sense of belonging, and remind us that struggle is simply a condition of the human experience. Celebrities reflect our personhood. They show us who we are, but they also charm us with illusion, showing us whom we want to be. The 20th century also saw the birth of the saying, "famous for being famous," believed to have first been used by Malcolm Muggeridge in his 1967 book, Muggeridge Through the Microphone. The act of being well known was slowly becoming further removed from a reason for being known in the first place. With these celebrities being pushed in our faces came the natural curiosity to know what they were like off the screen, away from the cameras. This evolved into the invasive culture of exposés, tabloid journalism, and biographies, where celebrities' lives, the good and bad, would be analysed and displayed for public consumption. Now we didn't need to just project onto a perfect life, but compare ourselves against a disgraced one, still making ourselves feel better for it. Seeing the downfall of seemingly well put together individuals helped us to feel better about ourselves. Additionally, knowing the intimate details of these celebrities' lives scratched a need to know itch. Today, this all continues, and Down and Out in Paradise is a good example of the extent people will go to figure out a celebrity's life, because without the context of the book, Learson was just a random guy, relative to Bourdain's life of course, rifling through Bourdain's texts, spending nights in the hotel where Bourdain took his last breath, and airing out his dirty laundry for the public to pay to read about. And for what? Because the demand is there, and we deem this kind of information as being worth knowing, no matter the moral or ethical cost. People have always wanted to understand celebrities. However, the evolution of this obsession to know accelerated with the rise of technology and our perceived closeness to a celebrity via social media. Our generation will be the generation where we didn't just celebrate famous people for being famous, but we also believed to know them as well. We believed we became their friends. Whereas before a celebrity would appear in occasional interviews, on stage or the screen, or in a newspaper, now we have constant updates from celebrities via social media. Whether the celebrity provides us with the content or whether a bystander films them minding their own business, it is rare for large names to disappear from the public simply because it is harder than ever to do so. With this proximity, parasocial relationships begin to form, and now the larger-than-life celebrity of the 20th century appears a few steps removed from ourselves, subconsciously teaching us that if we were just to work a little harder, get a little luckier, and a touch more beautiful, then we too can reach the celebrity status and orchestrate our fanbase to buy our endorsed products, for a high fee of course. And so, with all that being said, celebrity is a give and take affair. To be a celebrity means to become public property. Your privacy will be impeded on, your life will be scrutinized, and people will expect a lot from you. You are the business. Your name is no longer your name, but a brand. On the other hand, you will likely have a lot of money, easy access to pleasure, and doors will open for you without you even needing to give them a budge. So no complaining. We are all aware of these ups and downs. Nevertheless, we focus only on the ups, believing the downs must be manageable because the ups look so damn fun. But there are other motivations for want of celebrity, and not all come from such a light-hearted place. A while back, I began reading David Foster Wallace's 1997 novel, Infinite Jest. I got about 500 pages in, I couldn't finish it, which contains a brief scene on the topic of wanting to be famous. When beginning the book, I knew a thing or two about the general themes surrounding the seemingly vague, for lack of a better term, plot. It is a book that explores the themes of addiction, entertainment, and technology. To try and sum up the book at this stage would be impossible to do in any satisfactory way. So I'll just remain vague and merely say that addiction is a big overhanging theme in the motivations of the characters and how they go about the Infinite Jest landscape. Wallace seemed to have his finger on the pulse in regards to addiction. He knew that an addiction can form from any pleasure, no matter what it is. Anything that gives a human a buzz can become a psychological crutch, and this is no different when bringing the topic of fame and widespread recognition into the conversation. 388 pages of pain into Infinite Jest brought me to the nucleus of the topic being discussed right now. On this page begins a small interaction between the two characters, Lyle and Lamont Shue. I think that's how you say his name. In this scene, the latter confesses to the former that he has a desire to be famous. Lamont Shue desperately craves the highest level of professional tennis fame. He is an aspirational player residing at the Enfield Tennis Academy who wants to experience the heights of athletic glory. Photos on magazines, worldwide praise, professional stalkers wondering about the hows and whys behind the immense success he plans to make his own. The need to confess to these two feelings is down to two factors. The first is obvious: shame. Lamont Shue, like most everyone, knows that the outward declaration of a desire to be famous is taboo, and therefore internally he feels dirty for having ever wanted it. Secondly, and most importantly, the need to be famous clouds Lamont Shue's vision to such an extent that he gets worse at tennis, as he knows that every mistake made, game lost, and training session missed is an added gap to the gulf between his current status and the godlike status he so craves. His pursuit and therefore his happiness becomes not in the act of improving his game, but in the external acknowledgement of having done so, in turn thus ruining his game. An infinite cycle of misery. Before Infinite Jest was released in 1997, David Foster Wallace had been in the shoes of the character Lamont Shue. Through multiple interviews given throughout his life, Wallace spoke about a jumbled bag of ideas relating to fame, success, and an attainment of goals. Wallace was as naive as the next person in this regard. As a young man in the 1980s, he believed recognition and success in his writing would neatly tidy up the inadequacies of his character. With this mindset, he released his debut novel The Broom of the System in 1987 and had done so to moderate applause. As you would expect, the initial spike of claps and nods of affirmation lent him a momentary feeling of value. Subsequently, however, the sounds and sights of affirmations, through courtesy of the passage of time and man's unquenchable need for more, became a familiar white noise, allowing the same old thought process to kickstart where it left off, internally unsatisfied. In a Charlie Rose interview conducted in 1997, he expanded on his thoughts regarding this time in his life. The problem was, I started out wanting to be a writer and wanting to get some attention, and I got it really quick, and I realised it didn't make me happy at all. In which case, why am I writing? You know, what's the purpose of this? In short, Wallace understood on a visceral level that recognition and fame did not make him happy. He realised, like many celebrities do when reaching the heights of their industry, that fame is the cheese on a mousetrap waiting for the next person in line to die getting their hands on it. Die in a spiritual sense, not always a literal sense, although sometimes it is literal. Wallace places a lot of himself into Infinite Jest. Many passages and characters are the full expression of the less desirable parts of his personality. Lamont Shue thus is the old Wallace having a frank conversation with the new one. The latter tries to warn the former what Wallace could only learn through experience. Lamont, the truth is that the world is incredibly, unbelievably old. You suffer with the stunted desire caused by one of its oldest lies. Do not believe the photographs. Fame is not the exit from any cage. So why do we view fame in such a distorted manner? Why is the reality of fame so displeasing when placed in our laps? And what exactly is this cage? A popular literary convention is the Deus ex machina. For those unaware, the Deus ex machina is a new Latin translation of a Greek phrase, a god from a machine. The role of the Deus ex machina is to solve the convoluted issues of a plot in a sweepingly simple fashion. Let's say you have a story about a nuclear apocalypse. The bombs have been dropped, civilization, or what's left of it, has gone tribal, and devastation is everywhere. In this instance, the Deus Ex Machina would be something along the lines of the main character waking up and realizing it was all a dream. Or maybe it could be God intervening and reversing time. The point is, the Deus Ex Machina instantly solves all the problems of the plot without a case for argument. Fame is seen as a Deus Ex Machina to the plot of our lives. Life brings with it problems. We struggle in work to keep financially afloat, to retain meaning in the daily simplicities we repeat over and over again. Yet famous people, on the other hand, do not seem, keyword seem, to have these problems. They're universally loved, have loads of money, typically work jobs that are fun and or interesting, and I believe this to be the biggest turn on, outlive everyone else. Even in death, famous people are more remembered than you are. If we quickly revert back to Bourdain, we see his life's trajectory as ascending upon Kitchen Confidential's release. Once people started directing their attention towards Bourdain, rightfully so, as his memoir was and is great, his life story switches like a red light rising to a green. In the biographies, documentaries, and even in Bourdain's own interviews, the subtext of his life was that he was a loser until fame saved him. I'm not saying selling a load of books and becoming famous didn't help him. However, there are plentiful more realistic ways to fix your life that don't rely on so many factors so far removed from your control. There are many ways out of this cage. This want for celebrity and fame is so out of your hands that to be viewing it as a fix-all solution is unrealistic. Yet, at least in Bourdain's case, this is the narrative. And narratives like Bourdain's do romanticize the ascent of fame and celebrity, planting seeds of want within us, even if we don't realize it at first. Thus, fame is a Deus Ex Machina people want for themselves. They want to be freed from the cage of their problems via the magical problem-solving wand of fame. But despite fame seeming like a cure-all, end to past, present and future woes, we all know it comes with its own price. This price can be broken down into many fragments, but I believe fame sticks its heel in best to the person who desires it the most. Because once you have it, you couldn't dare to let it go. Yet, even those who do not have fame cannot let go of the desire for fame. This desire gets span around the head of the fame seekers. Triumphant stage performances, uproarious applause, photographers snapping photos on the red carpet, the celebration of one person and their unique and impactful spot in the cosmos. Just a few of the life-affirming benefits of swaying all those eyeballs in your direction. These moments, the sexy ones, are the idealized, play it over and over again moments that people resort to by default when fantasizing of their potential for the spoils, existential and material, of fame. To some extent, fantasizing a finer life is completely justified. However, sometimes the fantasizing goes too far, and for those that do fantasize about their own potential fame, you may not be dreaming or manifesting, but harboring a, what I like to call, life-neutering coping mechanism known as maladaptive daydreaming. Maladaptive daydreaming is a psychological phenomenon wherein an individual will daydream incessantly to cope with a stress, trauma, insecurity, or just general discomfort. These daydreams may vary in their contents. However, the act itself of constantly escaping reality and mentally retreating into a fantasy negatively impacts the lives of those who do it, as it prevents them from engaging in the real world. From researching various articles, forums, and experiencing my own form of maladaptive daydreaming in the past, the daydream often consists of a life positively enhanced. The fantasy life is, as you would expect, the ideal reality wherein the daydreamer has obtained whatever it is their ambition points towards. The maladaptive aspect of daydreaming is in the addictive quality of being able to live out the ideal lifestyle without having to construct it in reality. After a while, you can sit for hours wandering around in your own head, and some people do. I think everyone has had those daydreams wherein they do something and are admired for it in some way. I was recently speaking to somebody who told me about his fantasy when waiting at a metro station. He was fantasizing about saving someone who had fallen onto the metro tracks, and after helping them up, how he would nonchalantly act as if it were no big deal when the press hounded him for interviews to ask about the ordeal. There is a paradox here. The allure of his 15 minutes of fame is not in saving a life, or doing the right thing, or even outwardly lapping up the fame and the newfound attention itself, but instead in how he is perceived to welcome the fame. or should I say, not welcome it. In acting above caring about the newfound recognition, he would be performing correctly for the people now focused on him, who in turn, and he knows this, will reward him with more praise and attention. The person instinctively understood this because otherwise, why, even in your wildest fantasies, would you still be seen to not want the recognition? Underlying this daydream is an understanding of our inherent dislike for those who want widespread recognition. Oddly enough, we do not hate fame, we hate the people who want fame. This makes the maladaptive daydreamers keep their fantasies to themselves. Never do we look to fame and criticize the ridiculousness of revering a singular person, we just critique the person himself who would want to be revered. But why would we do that? From maladaptive daydreaming forums I've looked into online whilst researching for this video, I notice a lot of people's fantasies always termed fame, celebrity, and everything that comes along with it. Being beautiful, universally loved, celebrated for some reason. Even if the words celebrity and fame weren't used, it always had something to do with being recognised. But this is no surprise to me. We are raised with constant projections of celebrities' benefits and are shielded from the celebrity's reality during our youth. However, once the dark reality of fame has been exposed to us, we still don't quite comprehend that downside. It doesn't stay at the front of our minds. The good stuff does. We have spent so many years believing the hype that some begin to live in denial. They know exactly the shitstorm they're chasing when pursuing fame, but they do it anyway, because to them, fame has for many years been presented as the Deus ex machina to their unsatisfactory lives. And it's not that their lives or our lives are unsatisfactory, it's just that we have been shown a fantasy for so long we've grown to expect it for ourselves. And in relative terms, we feel let down by anything that isn't that fantasy. In life, everything has its balancing act. Life has death, happiness has anger, peace has war. Fame too manages to equalize the euphoric high of universal praise with equally negative side effects that contribute to declining mental health and substance abuse, and sometimes even the very worst of those two elements. We know what I'm talking about, but you can't say the word on YouTube. The dragon of fame is chased by generations of people, but can only be caught by so few, thus adding to its desirability. Those who catch it may do so through rolled up sleeves or simply circumstance, and some want it more than others. Those who do want it chase the dragon like an addict, clambering for the thing meant to introduce a meaningful high into their lives. Unlike drugs, which you can do pretty much whenever you want, although I wouldn't recommend it, fame can take years of striving to attain. That is why the realities of fame hit so hard, because it has such a build-up and such a high when introduced to a fresh-faced, unknown individual. The hard come down is found in the reality of fame not being the Deus ex machina to life, despite our culture constantly promoting it as being so. So to try and counter this, let's share some downsides without resorting too much to cliche. When talking on the negative aspects of fame, there is one aspect that I rarely see discussed. The constant anxiety a famous person must feel, knowing that 1. Their income is dependent on public opinion, and 2. Every encounter with a stranger equals multiple other encounters, meaning their actions within that singular interaction will spread throughout the stranger's social network, leaving their reputation to multiple people dependent on a singular event, which also may impact their future income. A famous person can never meet a single person at one time. Instead, when encountering a fan, the famous man or woman is, without ever having exchanged a syllable, meeting the fan's family, friends, and sometimes even work colleagues. If the famous person has a bad day and comes off the wrong way, the message gets relayed to the others, and suddenly the famous person is considered rude, arrogant, or entitled by not just that one fan, but everyone he or she knows. The heightened emotions within the dynamic of a fan interaction lends the end result to fall to either extremely good or bad. For the celebrity, this interaction is one of many, although we, the fans, don't like to think of it as this way. The additional negatives of fame come in the loss of freedom. As well as realizing your problems are not solved, you now have to deal with the same old you, but under public scrutiny. You will be followed around, judged on your appearance and your actions, and will never be able to fart without at least a jovial headline with some sort of flatulent pun being written up within the hour. That's hyperbole. With enough time in the spotlight, the famous person, known in his field, respected, conscious of his immortality to those who come after him, grows weary of those people taking the pictures being used for the magazines they formerly read whilst imagining themselves in, as Lamont Shue had in Infinite Jest. The man or woman wanted a piece of fame, and in return, everyone wanted a piece of them. But soon there is nothing left to give, despite the public constantly picking for more. Naturally, the famous person lives the rest of his or her life in contradiction. They adapt to their situation and try to get the best of both worlds, the perks of fame without the downsides. Thus, people navigate this new life the best way they can. They show up to luxurious parties, take all opportunities for money, and occasionally poke their head out to promote their new product. Yet at the same time, they try to live as they had once done before, and expect the world to treat them as if they had never chased this life in the first place. At one point in time, fame was something glitteringly seductive and an answer to their fledgling personal elements. Now the roller coaster has peaked, zipped around, and come to a standstill, and they realize they are still the same person, yet they are seen entirely differently by everyone else. The famous person thus spends the rest of their lives trying to retain the very thing they desperately wanted rid of, their privacy. Because we understand the taboo of want of recognition, we simultaneously want recognition but also want to be seen to understand how we should not want it at all. My friend's daydream is a good example of this. Part of the allure of the fame was to be seen as somebody who just didn't want it at all. Norwegian writer Karl Ove Knausgaard, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, articulated this paradox in a 2014 essay titled "I Am Someone, Look at Me," published in the New York Times, when he said, "The paradox is that fame, which emphasizes the individual, is so closely linked to selflessness, which is the obliteration of the individual, that the desire to be seen is so closely linked to the joy of self-concealment." Knausgaard was one of those writers whose fame was meteoric. Following the publication of his book My Struggle in 2009, Knausgaard had to quickly adapt to the fact that he was now well known. In the article, he speaks on the culture in Norway as appearing to be repulsed by fame or celebrity. He notes how the most famous people in the country were constantly downplaying their fame, earning themselves respect amongst the community by doing so. In fact, according to Knausgaard, the most popular royal family member of Norway was King Olav, who was deemed the people's king due to a photo of him displaying a ticket to a train conductor in 1973 during an oil crisis. This simple act performed by a powerful person garnered enormous praise. Nobody outwardly wants to admit to wanting to be famous. What people want is to be recognized and made famous through a series of events wherein they can act unfeeling, oblivious, or uncaring towards the thousands of eyeballs now facing their way. The more someone is perceived to not want the recognition, the more we are willing to give it. Some receive this recognition reluctantly, or appear to. Kurt Cobain is a good example of what we refer to as the reluctant celebrity. A person who, once reaching the top of his industry and becoming mega famous, played everything down and acted above the situation. In reality, Cobain wanted fame. Personal notebooks have verified this, as well as close accounts from friends. He wanted to be a famous rock star. Everyone close to him knew this. But morally, what is wrong with that? Celebrity has always been promoted to us as being a good thing, so why would we morally criticize somebody for wanting it? I mean, even the bad parts are romanticized. The tortured artist, the aforementioned reluctant celebrity, the rise and fall storyline, everything like that. It all plays into an overall sexy view of celebrity, regardless of the good or bad outcome. I am not saying fame and celebrity should then just be chased, but to act as if not wanting fame and wanting fame delineates between who is a moral person and who is not is just not true. Some people will doggedly chase fame in the same manner as some chase recreational pleasure. People can make autonomously stupid decisions worthy of critique, but in this case at least, I don't believe there should be moral critique. It's more of an education issue. We are wired to follow who a culture deems the most successful. In Jonathan Haidt's 2024 book The Anxious Generation, he notes how children have two programs in full swing when developing in the world. The first is conformist bias, which is the natural desire to be in tune with the rest of the group. The second is prestige bias, the desire to imitate whoever appears to be the most successful of the pack. These two programs help children adapt and learn about their cultural environment, thus allowing them to acclimate to the group they are in successfully. These two programs, when pumped full of sexy images of the finer lifestyle of fame, undoubtedly, in my mind at least, fine-tune young people to chase the carrot being dangled right in front of them: celebrity. Haidt speaks on social media's influence on my generation, Gen Z, in the following quote. However, I would have to assume social media could have been switched out for television and influencers for celebrities. And the same would apply for kids of the early 2000s, 1990s, 1980s, etc. Probably dating back to maybe the 1960s at a push. Social media platforms, which are engineered for engagement, hijack social learning and drown out the culture of one's family and local community while locking children's eyes onto influencers of questionable value. Nasgard admitted to wanting to be famous in his article. His manic dedication towards his writing had first begun as a manic dedication to being recognised, or at least wanting to be recognised. However, once he started working hard and got what he wanted, he didn't just realise the shallow nature of want for fame, but also discovered a purpose beyond recognition that he could have only discovered in chasing recognition itself. Love for the art and the process of hard work. This childish need to be exalted, which became uglier and more pathetic the older I grew, and which, based on what I've written so far, it doesn't take a psychoanalyst to realise was nourished by shame and self-hatred, now suddenly met its opposite. For what I discovered when I began to write my first novel was that I could disappear in my writing. The self, and all the difficulties and pain associated with it, vanished. I had always disappeared when I was reading. That was almost the whole point of reading for me. To be no one for a few hours. Now it happened while I was writing. Nasgard had taken the insecurities and shame he harboured and allowed it to be soothed within the creative process rather than the reaction to the art itself. This is just one of the ways I believe the juggle between art and fame for your art could potentially be done successfully. Death Grips is a good example of this successful juggle, as they prioritise the promotion of the art and not the artists themselves. By refusing interviews, direct contact with fans, and continually evolving beyond fan expectation, Death Grips almost taught their fanbase. We expect to hear the backstories behind songs, get a glimpse into the behind the scenes of albums' creations every once in a while, and hear directly from the artists thanking their loyal fanbase and telling them that they love them. Our culture has made us assume we will be given access to all of this information. Death Grips do none of this. In the early days, an interview or two were conducted, but since then there has been nothing. In 2016 they dropped an instrumental album titled Interview 2016. Accompanied along with it was a video featuring Matthew Hoffman, wherein the interview itself is silenced by their music. It's as clear a message as ever. What they are saying doesn't matter, just listen to the songs. Thomas Pynchon is another great example. To keep it short, Pynchon has been writing dense surrealist novels since the 1960s, and only a handful of pictures of him are around. He is intensely reclusive, and never elaborates on anything. Bourdain himself handled his fame and or celebrity correctly for many years. He wasn't selling himself out or riding the wave like so many others do. However, he always rode quite close to the sun at times, and evidently it engulfed him. Ultimately, you don't need to follow these examples if you are an aspiring artist. Engaging in the usual marketing outside of the art is not the wrong choice. The wrong choice is choosing to do the art for the outcome of celebrity, in my opinion at least. However, if you do want fame or celebrity, then knock yourself out. My main issue regarding both is with the contradiction. The constant applause of celebrity and the simultaneous social pressure to act as if it is not desirable. It doesn't make any sense. If we were able to openly talk of this desire, then we too would be able to caution people away from it. In acting as if it is morally wrong, as if to want a bit of fame is a bad thing and means you are a bad, selfish person, we discourage people who are chasing fame from being guided properly, and we are allowing them to mull in a silent delusion. What they really need to understand is that strangers cheering you on will not solve your problems, and hopefully in time, we can unlearn that pervading mindset in the years to come.